This week's Parsha is Parshas Vayikra. Parshas Vayikra talks about all the different sacrifices that the Jewish people have to bring when they sin. There is one specific sacrifice which we were discussing, and that is the Karban Asham. The category of Karban Asham, which is translated as a guilt offering, is an interesting sacrifice because the sacrifice is brought in an instance which is not found by any one of the other sacrifices, and that is, it is brought in a case where a person is not sure whether or not he has sinned, in a case of doubt. All the other sacrifices are either voluntary or they're because of something specific that occurred and that the person who is bringing them is positive they occurred. The guilt offering, the Karban Asham, is brought even if the person is not sure if he has sinned. What's interesting about the guilt offering is that the price of the sacrifice, the cost of the animal that needs to be brought for the sacrifice, is 48 times the cost of the sacrifice that is brought for a sin which one is positive that he has transgressed. Now, why would it be that someone is more liable, or seemingly more liable, for when he is not sure if he has sinned, for when he is positive they had sinned? The first thing we have to look at is the actual term used for the sacrifice. By a regular sin, when a person has inadvertently sinned, the language used for the sacrifice is chatas, which makes sense because chatas means sin. It's a sin offering because you've committed a sin, therefore you bring a sin offering. But in the case of the asham, the language of asham, which is translated as guilt, why would we use the language of guilty in the case of a doubt as to whether you had sinned, rather than the language of sin, which is used when you have for sure sinned? You're more guilty when you for sure sin than if you only in doubt whether you have sinned. And the answer is that the asham, the guilt offering, is brought because a person, not only is it because he's not sure if he has sinned, it's because the doubt as to whether he has sinned itself is a sin. Meaning that, yes, he may have sinned, and on the possibility that he has sinned, he should bring a sacrifice. But it's more than that. The fact that he was not careful, that he hadn't been cautious, and he was so uncautious that he doesn't even realize whether or not he has sinned, that in itself is a sin. Meaning that on the possibility that he has sinned, he has to bring a sacrifice because he has sinned. And on the possibility that he has not sinned, just the fact that he's not sure if he has sinned, and he has been lax in his awareness of whether he has sinned or not, that in itself is a sin. And that is why the asham is called a guilt offering, because he is more guilty than the one who has sinned and knows that he has sinned, because he really has two scratches on his record. First of all, that he may have sinned, and second of all, that he hasn't been cautious and aware of what he's doing. And that is also why the price tag on a Karban Asham, on the guilt offering, is so much more. The question, though, is that this is not the only instance where this category of sacrifice, this guilt offering, is required. There are two other cases where a person is obligated to bring a guilt offering. And that is, if a person was asked by another whether or not he had stolen from him, and the person swore that he had not stolen from him, and in the end turns out that the alleged person who stole actually did steal from his friend, then in that case he is obligated to bring a guilt offering, a Karban Asham. Also, if a person derives benefit from things owned by the temple, holy things, quote unquote, he is also obligated in a guilt offering. Now, why in those cases would someone be obligated in the specific sacrifice, which is usually designated for people who are not sure if they have sinned? Have a good Shabbos.